Today, I'm excited to welcome Christine Cox to the podcast. Christine is a creative force whose work spans live performance, film, TV, and theater, bringing her skills as both the producer and an artist manager to help shape and elevate projects. But today, Christine is joining us to share from a very personal place her experience as the non-ADHD partner in her marriage. And while ADHD is often discussed through the lens of the person who has it, Christine brings an important perspective that isn't really talked about nearly enough: the challenges, the judgments, and the emotional toll that can fall on the partner who's working to keep things on track amidst the chaos. She's here to shed light on what it really looks like behind the scenes, how she's navigated being labeled as controlling or too bossy by those who don't understand the dynamics, and what she wishes people could emphasize with more when it comes to non-ADHD partners. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast for such an important discussion. Christine, welcome to the podcast. If you can start off by telling our listeners a little bit about your relationship and maybe when you first realized that ADHD was a major factor in your partner's behavior or in your overall relationship dynamic.
Sure. So I have been with my husband, Max, for close to 20 years. And I can remember we've been married for just over 11 years. And I can remember coming back from our wedding, maybe it's 2 to 3 months. And I just thought something is off. There's just something not right. And I remember we were both fighting, and I couldn't even tell you what it was that we were fighting about. Something had happened, absolutely ADHD fueled. And we were both sitting in separate rooms, texting back and forth to each other because that was the only way that we could communicate. And he said, I think we should go to counseling. And I said, yes. And I don't know what possessed me, but I started looking up therapists, and I was specifically looking up therapists that specialized in ADHD. And at that point, we'd been together, I guess, about 8 years, I knew that his behavior and these things that just would make me so frustrated and upset and angry he wasn't trying to be difficult, but he was dealing with a lot of these difficult things. And yeah, I would say that was sort of the origin. And then I remember going to this therapist, and we were a couple sessions in, and he looked right at the both of us and he said, there is no doubt in my mind that your husband has ADHD. Would you like to go through the process and get him officially diagnosed? And so we did. And that was in our mid-30s. So he lived most of his life until his mid-30s, finding out that he had ADHD.
Yeah, it's really interesting because kind of like when we found out about my husband's diagnosis, we were I want to say, I was in my early 20s. He was probably in his mid-20s at this point in time. And we had also been in couples therapy. And I just remember at some point, my husband had some individual sessions, and he did ultimately have a formal diagnosis after taking some sort of questionnaires, and he ended up being diagnosed with borderline. It kind of made sense later. I think like most people, like when you're first diagnosed with something, are like kind of skeptical about it, or you're not like ready to believe it, right? And I think for me, it made sense just because there were like signs early on in the relationship typically, and it's improved thus far. But I remember early on, there would be like a lot of forgetfulness, and I would just have to remind him a lot about different things. And we're at a point now to where I'm like, I understand like you're dealing with this, but you gotta, use a note taker, put it on your calendar, something, because it's not my job to remind you, hey, we got this potluck on Sunday or this doctor's appointment. And so he's been a lot better with that. But like earlier on, I don't know, like you told me that 2 days ago. How do you expect me to remember? It's much better now. But for a long time, we really kind of struggled in that way. And I noticed like his attention to detail also is like something that he's been like really struggling with over the years too. And I think it's really common for a lot of folks who have ADHD and ADD as well. And I know for me, like it manifests a little bit differently, but I know like, yeah, that's been something like, cause we've been together like 18 years at this point. It's just like so frustrating, like the constant reminders, because like, I don't want to feel like I'm your mom, you know?
Oh,
Um,
never.
yeah,
And when the roles get reversed like that and you get forced into that position and you're so resentful of yourself and you're like, oh, I did it again. I did that motherly thing that I swore that I was never going to do.
right.
But it sometimes feels like the only option in that moment because it can get so emotional and escalate so fast. It's almost like I sort of almost rationalize it with the mom thing of we don't have children of our own, but you've seen the scenario with the mom that just does the kids' homework because they just want their kid to stop whining. And like you just like, fine, I'll just take care of it. Even though you said you weren't going to take care of it, you weren't
Yes.
going to do that thing for them.
Yeah, it's like honestly, I've had that struggle when it's come to like household chores. Sometimes it feels like certain things aren't clean enough, and like sometimes I find myself like, okay, wanting to just do it myself. But like you were saying, like the mom and child scenario, that's kind of like where I've kind of found myself in. Like, oh, okay, well, he's not doing it to my liking, so like I feel like I have to do it, and yeah, I can definitely identify with that frustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any early misunderstandings or challenges that you might have faced before ADHD was identified?
Well, I think a big thing is even just how society views ADHD and this idea of it's a Dennis the Menace sort of situation. And I don't know if that reference will mean a lot to some younger folks that might not know who Dennis Menace is, but it's like just the kid who can't sit still. And that misunderstanding, I also think that a lot of folks kind of labeling ADHD in other ways. It feels like an undereducation about it. It's like, oh, well, your husband's just hyper and he's very kid-like and he can't sit still. And there's sort of a disconnect to this is a medical diagnosis. He's not trying to be this way. And then there's a lot of the negative sort of downfalls get sort of my husband's an artist. He's a performer. So it's like, oh, that's just how an artist is, but that's not necessarily the truth. So I know I've sort of jumped around your question, but I think this sort of struggle under a real understanding of what ADHD actually is feels like a big challenge that I face constantly, especially in the beginning for myself, because I myself didn't know what ADHD really was and what it entailed.
Yeah, and I think for me, something else that I found that like has been a struggle, like more recently, within the last 10 or so years, now that smartphones are just like heavily integrated within our lives. And when I first met my husband, when we still had like basically analog phones.
Oh, remember those days?
Yes. And so we didn't really have this issue quite then. And I think at the time when we met, I think I had a Go phone. It was just like for calls and that was it. And as smartphones kind of came in, like I felt like we kind of were on the bandwagon a little bit later, like as like with iPhones coming in, with the introduction of smartphones. But I would say probably within the last 10 years, like one of the things that I've seen my husband really struggle with is that whenever he's bored, like he can't, and I think this applies to so many people, not even necessarily just folks with ADHD, but like say you're standing in line waiting for checkout or any sort of line, like the phone will come out. You'll be like surfing the internet, checking your text messages, checking your email, da 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 da. Maybe it's playing a game on your phone. For him, it's definitely playing a game on his phone. And so sometimes I've noticed that, like, if there's any lull periods like that, sometimes we'll be out to dinner with friends and like the phone comes out. And so this is something that's like been sort of a point of contention between us because it's like, there's like maybe one or two people that maybe comment on how often he's on his phone. And so initially we didn't really think too much of it. But then when it became his family, my family, and our group of friends, I'm like, okay, well, all these people are noticing. So it's not like it's just like one random person. And so that's something that actually like we've been like working on in therapy actually, because he's like, well, but I'm listening though. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not really the point. Like if let's say we're out to dinner, we need to like, be phone free for this hour or whatever. And he seems like he really just like needs to be like on his phone, playing the games, right? And phones again are designed to be addicting. And so I think it's like even more tempting for someone with ADHD. Like again, you're standing in line. And I think so many of us like have very short attention spans as it is. Even more so for someone with ADHD, like the phone will come out, because it's like us have a hard time just being present, like in the moment, especially for this or bored, just standing there or waiting, right? And so I know that's another thing for him that really kind of stands out. That's something that he really struggles with. He's actually gotten a little bit better with it. That now that he's kind of identified that, okay, yes, this is an issue. Like the phone shouldn't come out when we're in a social setting with friends, unless you're checking something really quick. I understand that you might be listening, but we need to be fully present. So that's one
I
such situation that's kind of grinded my gears for the last several years.
I
But
could
I think a
relate
lot of,
so much. It's that constant need. The ADHDer needs that
yes,
constant need of stimulation
yeah,
that goes against all of, because socially it's like we're with people. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. You're hanging out with the people and not on your phone. And it's so easy to slip out of that and almost forget where they are. And because at that moment, their brain's like, you need stimulation, you need stimulation, you need to be stimulated because they've checked out of the conversation. They were never in the conversation to begin with. With all of these things that are struggles that ADHD really intensifies.
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of folks just don't really realize the mental and emotional labor that the non-ADHD partner might really be carrying. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of load that you might be carrying in terms of like maybe keeping things on track, whether it's emotionally, logistically, or otherwise?
That one thing that really jumps out and comes to mind first is just there's judgment. And this is something that I didn't pick up on initially, but just the judgment of people around you. So if we're using this example where you're in a social setting and your spouse picks up his phone, you know exactly what's going on. He's bored for whatever reason. So then there's judgment from the people around you of just like, oh God, I can't believe that she's just like letting him play on his phone. And so there's that judgment. And then there's another judgment because then when you call your spouse out, you might be like, what are you doing? Put the phone away. And you say it in this sharp, quick way. And then the friends that you're with are like, oh my gosh, why is Christine talking to Max like that? She's so bossy. She's so snippy. She's so controlling. And it's because they have no concept of how this is the 800th time you may be saying those exact words to your
Yes,
spouse
100%.
just that day. So it's judgment on why aren't you doing something about it? Or why are you controlling and so that's a labor. I've had so many moments of just kind of breaking down and realizing, and people that really deeply care about me, friends and family, to only realize that they don't actually understand because they want to be logical. They want to be like, oh, well, just ignore it. If he's not in the conversation, he's not in the conversation. But they're just being pragmatic and logical, but they don't understand. And then that leads to this other labor of feeling really alone and feeling like nobody gets me and what I'm going through. And there's always this quick, like, oh, well, that's just how Max is. And this brushing it off. But then you're sort of by yourself feeling judged, whether you're actually being judged or not, in that sort of scenario that I'm presenting. Then there's the other thing that happens when you're protecting your spouse, because I've also had situations where Max went to play golf with a neighbor. And a couple days later, I was sitting at our local bar. He came over and he said, I don't think it's a good idea for Max to play golf with me and my buddy. I said, oh, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know how Max is. So then I'm now protective saying, well, explain this to me. Oh, well, he's just really loud and, it's just not the vibe that my friend had. So now I'm protecting my spouse, defending my spouse, and also confused as to why this friend can't just go straight to my spouse and say there's a problem but he has to come to me to be the guardian of it. I don't know if any of this resonates with you, but it's very
No,
multi-layered.
it absolutely does, because it's a really tough position to be in, because I found myself unintentionally like in the middle of, for example, my husband and some of my family members. And it's a really hard place to be in as a spouse, and then also as a family member, because you feel like you were saying, like you kind of have to defend your spouse. And sometimes it's even like when you know they're wrong, or maybe it's like the other person, the other family member, maybe you don't agree with, and you're feeling like you're having the two sides. And that's definitely like a really challenging thing. And thinking back to what you're mentioning about feeling like you kind of have to like defend behavior, that's definitely something that I've kind of encountered. For example, like my brother has mentioned, like jokingly, oh, yeah, Patrick, he's always on his phone, da da da, kind of like jokingly, but like also at the same time expecting me to say something. But then, like, as you're mentioning, like, if I say something like, oh my gosh, she's so controlling and da da da, and like, he doesn't get treated very well, like all these presumptuous statements. And it's really difficult. How would you say
And then
that?
isn't it great when you agree? Also, like when
Yes,
somebody's coming to you and you're defending and you're protecting, but you're like, I also agree with you.
right?
That's super annoying.
Oh, yes, 100%. Like the phone thing. Like it's something that like definitely grinds my gears. And that's like something that we brought up in therapy. I think now he has a lot more self-awareness about this issue. We could joke about it,
Yeah.
but at one point in time, like it was really frustrating because folks would make these comments and it'd be like something that, okay, this actually does bother me too.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any communication tools or maybe strategies that you may have found helpful in navigating some of these ADHD related frustrations?
This one's taken me a long time, and it's one of the things that I'm really working on, but is finding the humor in it. Because I oftentimes will, if I'm able to, and I'm getting better at this, it's funny. I mean, it's like we're in a sitcom sometimes. It's like, I can't believe this chain of events that just went on. And I'm sitting here and I have to laugh about it. And I think that what you're saying too about as they become more aware and sort of the behaviors feel less like you're their mom scolding them, but you're their life partner who's living this life with them. And we have to laugh. And I know it's so much easier said than done. And I think a lot of it too is pulling myself out of those emotional moments. I started writing a book, which I have not published yet, but I call it Life with an Escape Artist. And it's a term that my husband came up with a book that he's also writing that he has not finished called The Escape Artist. And we connect, and this is not all 100% ADHD, because I think we also, for the terms of just for what we're talking about today, ADHD comes with a lot of cousins, anxiety, depression. There's a lot there. It's usually not just ADHD. And sitting down and just writing journal style, which is how it kind of started, has been so therapeutic. And then to be able to go back and sort of look at those writings when I'm in a less emotional state, I can then be the pragmatic person and say, oh, this is what's happening. And then when you start writing stuff, you start connecting the dots, you start seeing the patterns. And then I think the sort of, again, all easier said than done, is there's a lot of things that I shouldn't be accountable for and that I can't fix. And being able to accept that and letting go is really something that I feel like in this journey, I have been longing for somebody else to tell me the things that I'm sharing with you right now, and why I felt like, oh, I really need to sit down and write this, because I needed a grounded person who wasn't going to tell me that I was being bossy, wasn't going to let the ADHD off the hook, but was going to just say, okay, from your perspective, this is going to be hard. It's lonely, but you're not insane. And this is a relationship between two people. And to not prioritize the ADHDer in all of this, but also to not expect the ADHDer to prioritize you, but to prioritize yourself.
And that kind of actually leads me into my next question. When you have encountered maybe others that are misjudging your tone, reactions, or intentions as controlling or too much, how have you responded to that? And what kinds of self care have you leaned into kind of maintain your own wellness in the relationship?
At first, my instinct was I need to educate and explain. And what I've been finding myself in the last few years doing a lot less of is explaining. And what that's done is it almost breaks the cycle because sometimes it feels like these things go on longer because we ourselves, and I'm talking here about the non-ADHDers, we go on this, I call it like the emotional chaos loop. We go on it not because we wanted to, but it's like we've just gone through this, we're on the loop with the ADHDer. I'd like to tell you it's like I go to a spa and relax, but usually that's just an escape. And talking about ADHD, oftentimes a lot of those behaviors are escape behaviors. Frankly, getting on your phone, yes, you want stimulation, but you're also just trying to escape a situation, a social situation in that example. So I think that leaning back into what I was talking about with the humor, talking about with the I'm just going to eject myself from this. And also really forcing myself to prioritize myself and not build this life that revolves around what I think will make my husband. Because if I'm not happy, then we have a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I can really relate to too, because as you're mentioning, it's like they're trying to distract themselves generally from something or whatever it is that's going on. And kind of coming back to a lot of people that don't really kind of understand the dynamic, especially if you are dealing with a non ADHD partner, with an ADHD partner. What do you wish more people perhaps understood about being the non ADHD partner in the dynamic?
I wish they would be more curious. Empathy, right, is in the title of this podcast. But I want that curiosity to lead to that empathy. And not that I want people to feel like they have to sympathize or feel sorry or anything, but be curious. And I would love to engage into more of those conversations of folks sort of asking in just the conversation that you and I are having right now, where they're asking about what is life like in these situations? How have you handled them? Just to engage in conversation versus telling me what they think I should be doing or what I did was wrong and how I handled that situation. So wouldn't that be nice? More curiosity.
Yes, for sure. Is there any advice that you might give someone who might be feeling judged or overwhelmed or unseen in this dynamic?
I'm laughing because it's like that's sort of the crux of what I envision in this book. And as I've been writing it is, and I think I said it earlier too, it's like, you're not insane. It's like, I want them to know that they're not crazy and that they're not actually alone. Because I think the loneliness has been the most surprising in all of this and that lack of understanding. And I would love for there to be more education out there. There's still a lot of misconceptions around ADHD and just more factual information that would be easily accessible so that people could understand ADHD a little bit better. I think that that would also lead to more curiosity and more empathy towards the partner.
Well said, because
Yeah.
it's a hard dynamic to go through. But I want to touch on you're writing a book. And can you share a little bit about that with our listeners and perhaps where they can connect with you and learn more about you?
Absolutely. My work revolves also in the entertainment industry. I'm a producer. I work in the theater and film and television. My husband and I live a nomadic lifestyle, which is insane for an ADHDer, but that's for a whole nother episode. I'm on Instagram. That's my favorite social of choice, Miss Christine Cox. And the book is in the works, but definitely it's not going to be, let me just complain about my husband and how difficult life is. The concept is life with an escape artist, and it really is to capture what that life is like, because there's so many wonderful things. And I suspect for you too, Valerie, we wouldn't be married to these men if they didn't live this incredible life with us. And
yes,
the beauty of when you have somebody that's so impulsive that helps you be more impulsive and be more shameless, and what can ADHD do to bring more life and just enhance your quality of life. And so I want to, the book is really touching on a lot of that too, and how you can live a beautiful life with somebody with ADHD. And that is the crux of it.
yeah. And I want to say that impulsivity is my husband in a nutshell, and he's totally aware of it. He'll totally admit to it whenever you talk to him about it. And I definitely think like I'm very intrigued by your nomadic lifestyle, especially when it comes to ADHD, as someone who is an avid traveler. So that's definitely a conversation that I would love to have with you in the future if you're open to it. But thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been such an amazing discussion. And I know for so many folks out there, whether you have ADHD or you're the not ADHD partner in the relationship, I think there's something for everyone to take away from this conversation.
Yes, please, let's do it again.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Christine. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.